These are the 5 most successful tech billionaires of all time. Each one is dominant in a category nobody else comes close to. The first turned $180 million into the largest personal fortune in human history in under 25 years. The second made a single $500,000 bet that became one of the greatest returns in venture capital history. The third built an empire by losing money on purpose for 2 decades straight. The fourth got fired from his own company. Then he came back bigger than before. And the fifth got fired by his own board and got his job back in 5 days. 5 categories, 5 very different kinds of success. Starting with category 1, speed. Most successful tech billionaire by sheer velocity of wealth creation, Elon Musk. In 2002, Musk sold his stake in PayPal and walked away with about $180 million after taxes. That was enough money to never work again. Instead, he split almost all of it across 3 companies that most serious investors thought were insane. He put around $100 million into SpaceX, a rocket company, at a time when the only people building rockets were governments. He put around $70 million into Tesla, when electric cars were a punchline, and he put $10 million into SolarCity. He kept almost nothing for himself. For years, this looked like the dumbest decision a newly rich man had ever made. SpaceX had 3 launches in a row that failed. Tesla nearly went bankrupt more than once. In 2008, during the financial crisis, Musk was reportedly down to his last few $1,000,000. He was personally borrowing money to make payroll at both companies in the same month. Then everything compounded at once. Tesla became the most valuable car company on Earth. SpaceX became the only private company capable of flying astronauts to the International Space Station. By 2024, Musk had become the first person in history to reach $400 billion. He kept going. In June 2026, after the valuation of SpaceX climbed past $2 trillion following the largest IPO in history, Musk crossed $1.5 trillion personally. He became the first trillionaire in recorded history. He takes no salary. He takes no dividends. Almost his entire fortune sits in stock he has never sold. It was built from one decision to risk everything on companies nobody else believed in. But speed cuts both ways. The same risk tolerance that built SpaceX and Tesla has made Musk one of the most legally exposed executives alive. Courts have struck down his Tesla pay packages. Workers at his factories have alleged unsafe conditions during periods of extreme production pressure. And the same willingness to bet everything on a hunch has meant promising self-driving timelines that arrived years late. Musk built the fastest personal fortune in history around a pair of industries everyone said were impossible. Whether that speed was reckless or visionary depends on which year you ask him. Category 2. The single best bet. Most successful tech billionaire by sheer return on a single decision, Peter Thiel. In 2004, a Harvard dropout running a website out of a Cambridge dorm room was looking for funding. Most investors would not touch it. Social networks had a track record of dying fast, and this one was, on paper, just a glorified college directory. Peter Thiel wrote a check for $500,000 for 10% of the company. The company was Facebook. Thiel had already made one fortune. He had co-founded PayPal alongside Musk and walked away with tens of millions when eBay bought it. But the Facebook bet was a contrarian read on a market everyone else thought they understood. Thiel believed in monopolies before they were proven. He believed in founders before they had track records. The Facebook stake alone eventually returned him more than $1 billion as he sold shares following its 2012 IPO. That is roughly 2,000 times his original investment. Thiel did not stop there. He co-founded Palantir, a data analytics company built to help intelligence agencies make sense of overwhelming information after the September 11th attacks. Palantir was unfashionable and deeply distrusted by Silicon Valley for years. Thiel held on anyway. It is now worth over $300 billion. His roughly 4% stake alone is worth more than $13 billion, nearly half his current net worth. He also became the first outside investor in SpaceX, years before anyone else in venture capital thought rockets were fundable. The PayPal alumni network he built, often called the PayPal Mafia, went on to found or fund LinkedIn, YouTube, and Yelp. The uncomfortable part of how Thiel succeeded is what his contrarianism extends to outside of investing. He has bankrolled lawsuits designed to financially destroy media organizations he disagreed with. He has funded political candidates and movements built explicitly around distrust of democratic institutions. The same instinct that lets him see value where others see nothing has, by his own framing, made him deeply skeptical of the systems most people assume are worth protecting. Thiel proved that a handful of correct contrarian bets can outperform the conventional wisdom of an entire industry. He also proved that the same mind can use its winnings to bet against the institutions everyone else takes for granted. Category 3. Scale through patience. Most successful tech billionaire at building something larger than anyone thought possible. Jeff Bezos. In 1997, Amazon was a company that sold books on the internet. It had revenue of about $150 million. Bezos refused to do what every other public company did. In his very first letter to shareholders, he wrote a sentence that became scripture inside Amazon for the next 2 decades. The company would focus on long-term market leadership over short-term profit. Some investments would pay off and others would not, and either way the company would learn from it. Wall Street hated this. For years, analysts mocked Amazon as a company that could not turn a profit, no matter how much revenue it generated. That was because Bezos kept plowing every dollar back into warehouses and infrastructure that nobody else was willing to fund. He priced products to minimize margin on purpose. He told shareholders that lower margins now would produce more value later, because customers eventually notice who is giving them the best deal. This is the part almost nobody else in business is willing to do. Public companies live and die by quarterly earnings. Bezos spent 2 decades convincing shareholders to ignore them in favor of a bet that would not pay off for years. Amazon Web Services started as an internal tool to manage the infrastructure of Amazon itself. Bezos opened it to outside companies almost as an afterthought. Today it generates more operating profit than the entire retail business of Amazon. The result of 2 decades of patience is a company worth more than $2 trillion. It was built from a $150 million bookstore that lost money on purpose for years at a time. But scale built on this kind of patience has a human cost that scales right alongside it. Warehouse workers at Amazon have for years described grueling injury rates, intense productivity quotas tracked down to the second, and limited bathroom breaks during peak shipping seasons. The same relentless focus on the customer that made Amazon the most efficient logistics network on Earth has, according to numerous labor investigations, come at the direct expense of the people stocking the shelves and packing the boxes. Bezos proved that if you can convince the market to wait long enough, patience beats nearly every other strategy in business. He also proved that the bill for that patience often gets paid by people who never got a vote in the decision. Category 4. The comeback. Most successful tech billionaire at being fired and coming back bigger than before, Steve Jobs. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple, the company he had co-founded in his parents' garage, less than a decade earlier. The boardroom fight was brutal and public. Jobs lost a power struggle with the CEO he himself had recruited. He sold off almost all his stock, and he walked away humiliated. What he did next is the part most people forget. He founded a new computer company called Next. It built high-end workstations that never found a mass market, but it quietly developed software years ahead of its time. He also bought a struggling computer graphics division off George Lucas for $10 million and renamed it Pixar. For years, Pixar bled money until it partnered with Disney and released Toy Story in 1995, the first fully computer-animated feature film. It was a cultural sensation. Meanwhile, Apple was dying. By 1996, the company had burned through 3 CEOs. It had lost the personal computer war to Microsoft, and it came within 90 days of bankruptcy. In a last-ditch effort to modernize its operating system, Apple bought Next for $400 million. This brought Jobs back into the building as a consultant. A year later, the board pushed out the sitting CEO. On September 16, 1997, Steve Jobs was named interim chief executive of the company that had fired him 12 years earlier. He took an axe to nearly every product Apple made. He cut the lineup down to a handful of machines. He launched the iMac in 1998, then the iPod, Then the iPhone in 2007, which did not just save Apple, it redefined what a phone was for an entire planet. By the time Jobs passed away in 2011, Apple had become, at various points, the most valuable company on Earth. It was built on products developed during the second act of a man who had been publicly fired from the company that bore his name. The cost of that intensity is well documented by the people who worked closest to him. Former colleagues and biographers have described Jobs as a brutal manager prone to public humiliation of employees, someone who could reduce people to tears in meetings. The same obsessive perfectionism that produced the iPhone also produced a workplace that many who lived through it described as genuinely difficult to survive. Jobs proved that getting fired from your own company is not necessarily the end of the story. He also proved that the ruthlessness it took to come back that hard rarely stays contained to just the boardroom. Category 5. The fastest power consolidation. Most successful tech billionaire at surviving an attempt to remove him and emerging with more control than before. Sam Altman. On Friday, November 17th, 2023, the board of OpenAI fired its CEO. This was not a normal corporate ouster. OpenAI had been deliberately structured as a non-profit. The goal was that no single person, including its own CEO, could hold unchecked power over a technology its founders believed might be among the most dangerous and most beneficial humanity would ever build. Altman sat on that board, but held no equity in the company under its original structure. The board said in a statement that Altman had not been consistently candid in his communications, and that they no longer had confidence in his ability to lead the company. 4 board members, including the chief scientist and co-founder of the company itself, voted to remove him. What happened over the next 5 days had never happened before at this scale in tech. Nearly all of the nearly 800 employees at OpenAI signed a letter demanding the board resign and reinstate Altman. They threatened to quit and join him at Microsoft otherwise. Microsoft, which had invested billions into OpenAI without a formal board seat, applied enormous pressure behind the scenes. It reportedly offered Altman a job directly. Facing the possible total collapse of the company they were trying to protect, the board reversed course. On Tuesday, November the 21st, Altman was reinstated as CEO. Every board member who had voted to remove him was gone within weeks. The structural safeguard designed specifically to remove him had been used exactly once, and it failed within 5 days. Since then, OpenAI has been moving away from the non-profit structure that gave the board its power in the first place. It is restructuring toward a more traditional for-profit model, now reportedly valued near $300 billion. The exact mechanism built to check the power Altman holds is, by most outside accounts, being dismantled. Critics, including former leadership at OpenAI itself, have not been quiet about what they saw. The former chief technology officer of the company reportedly told colleagues she did not feel comfortable with Altman leading the company toward artificial general intelligence. The co-founder and former chief scientist of the company reportedly said he did not believe Altman was the person who should have the finger on the button. Altman is, in some sense, the inverse of every other story on this list. The others built something, then survived attempts to take it from them. Altman survived an attempt by the very people designed to hold him accountable. He came out the other side with the accountability structure itself weakening. Whether that makes him the most resilient executive in tech, or the clearest example of why non-profit oversight over the most powerful technology on Earth does not actually work, depends entirely on who you ask. So there you have it. 5 tech billionaires, 5 categories, the fastest fortune ever built, the single best bet in venture capital history, 2 decades of patience that built a $1 trillion company, the greatest professional comeback ever recorded, and a 5-day power struggle that ended with less oversight than before it started. Who did it best? That is it for this video. If you found this interesting, subscribe down below for more.